This is Bloomberg Businessweek Daily, reporting from the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead, with insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Businessweek Daily with Carol Massar and Tim Stenivek, live on Bloomberg Radio, television, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
A very good afternoon, everyone. Live on Bloomberg TV Radio, streaming on YouTube and Bloomberg Originals. I'm Emily Graffeo, along with my co-host Matt Miller.
It's great to be here. It's great to be here. I'm doing very well. You know, I opened the market this morning. We had much bigger drops on futures than we did in the cash trade, and now we've slid down to those levels on the indexes. So the S&P down more than 1%. Concerns about valuations really weighing on this market, and I'm pretty excited to see how it goes to the close.
Yeah, investors finding safety in the dollar, finding safety in treasuries. And we have another piece of news happening today, Matt. Do you know what it is? Do you know what's going on in the world?
I mean, I know that there are elections today, and here in New York City, it's being painted as so important because it's likely that a socialist wins control of this bastion of capitalism. And it's also being painted as maybe sort of a turning point for the Democratic Party. I'm not sure if I buy into that.
Okay.
You could just as easily make the case that Mikey Sherrill is the turning point for the Democratic Party, and she is running for governor in New Jersey. But there are important elections and ballot decisions across the country.
And we're going to be talking about all of that, not only the races in New York City, but also Virginia, New Jersey, and beyond. We have a stacked show on the election today. Kathy Wylde, president and CEO of the Partnership of New York City, is going to join us soon, Matt.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I mean, as I said, there's a lot to talk about in terms of politics. It's going to affect the way a lot of people live in this city. She's one of the most powerful women in politics. It'll, I guess, the outcome of this election be important to women as well, potentially, because remember why Andrew Cuomo left the governor's office in Albany, and now New Yorkers are being asked to put him in charge again.
Right. We're going to have all of that and more. First up, though, let's get a check on the day's trade and top business stories. Here's Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much. Lots going on indeed. And want to begin, instead of the equity markets, I do want to begin with crypto because we did see Bitcoin briefly trading below $100,000. Bitcoin right now does remain lower, pairing its losses down 5.1%. Bitcoin now at 101,340 on Bitcoin. Again, Bitcoin now down by 5.2%, but the key takeaway was trading briefly below 100K, 101,339 right now, 101,339 on Bitcoin as I speak. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all in the red right now. We do have stocks selling off today. We've got the NASDAQ Composite Index slumping by 1.6%, S&P down 1%, Dow Industrials lower now by just about 0.6%. Stock bulls getting a wake-up call from Wall Street CEOs. We've got the 10-year currently yielding at right now 4.08%, with a 2-year 3.57%. Gold down $62 the ounce. Spot gold $39.38 the ounce, down 1.6%. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.6%, $60.70 for a barrel of WTI. Bitcoin bears repeating now at 101,450. We've got Bitcoin down by just about 5.1%. Lots going on in the pizza world. Apollo Global has withdrawn its offer to take pizza chain Papa John's private at $64 a share. This according to Reuters, citing two sources. Shares of Papa John's, PZZA on the ticker. It is down now by 17%. And over at Yum Brands, just a month into becoming CEO at Yum, Chris Turner has decided it might be time to ditch Pizza Hut. We got Pizza Hut, Yum brand shares, Yum parent of Pizza Hut, up by 6.8%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, thanks, Charlie. Matt Miller here with us today, Bloomberg Business Week. Stocks dropping on this election day. The S&P 500 down almost 1%. Tech stocks getting crushed even further, Matt. And really the only place to hide out is the dollar and treasuries today. There's also a chorus of Wall Street executives warning investors to brace for a pullback amid lofty valuations. Gillian Wolff is here. Are you You're doubtful?
I mean, you know what? It's the first thing I saw this morning. When I logged onto the Bloomberg terminal at like 4:30 in the morning, I saw this story that Wall Street bigwigs are warning about a pullback.
That's what's happening.
Then I read the story, and it wasn't really that much of a warning. I mean, they're saying, yeah, within the next 2 years, you could see a 5 to 10% drop. Really? I think we all expect that to be the case.
That is very true. Let's get Gillian Wolff's take on this. She's global equity strategist at Bloomberg Intelligence, here with us in the Bloomberg Businessweek studio. Let's just start right there, because that is the headline today that Wall Street execs are warning. But Matt is right. Some of these warnings were like, stocks could drop 10% in a year.
It's not the easiest call to make.
Right. Or what was it, that 60 Minutes interview that happened recently? Where somebody said, oh, eventually there will be a downturn. Eventually there will be a downturn. I think we've been hearing these warnings, I almost feel like for the past 18 months, about, is AI a bubble? Is there going to be a downturn? Are stocks getting too hot? And we just haven't seen it occur yet. But I think I want to point out two important things, which is one, that at the start of this year, investors, or the consensus, really thought that AI earnings growth was going to slow and the rest of the index was going to catch up. AI just gotten too hot. The comps were too difficult. This had to be a bubble. The rest of the market had to catch up. That was the call starting 2025. Now that's been pushed out to 2026 again. AI stocks have actually done much better on earnings than investors thought, and the rest of the market has been lagging on earnings growth. So this convergence thesis still gets pushed out further and further. So the question of whether or not is AI a bubble, we had that call at the start of the year and it didn't play out. And the idea of this just can't get much hotter. The second thing I do think that investors are starting to look at right now, though, is capital discipline, right? And I think the Meta call last week told us a lot, because Meta beat, but they tanked on more CapEx spending than maybe investors, the consensus, would have liked to see. I think we're now maybe entering a phase where it's not so much about whether or not these AI stocks can deliver, but are they maintaining enough discipline? Are they getting over their skis, right? Are they building out too fast, faster than necessarily companies could adopt the technology? Whether or not eventually companies will adopt the technology is still to be seen. But I think there's this concern starting to grow of, well, are we going too fast with this level of investment? I
mean, the one thing I would say about Meta is that of the big hyperscalers, it doesn't have a clear line to show you what kind of ROI they're getting on their investment, right? And Mark Zuckerberg seems the most excited of all the major CEOs to overspend if possible, right? He actually said, could we overspend by a couple of $100 billion? Yes, but it's better than the alternative, which is not spending enough. And that's not the kind of sort of freewheeling, loose purse strings talk you hear from the Microsoft CEO, for example.
But if anything, that tells you maybe that this isn't this overly exuberant bubble, right? The idea that you can spend too much, let's not get too overzealous about the trade. Investors are still a bit wary about it, right? A bubble implies that you're investing in companies like in 2000 that don't even have an earnings stream yet, hoping that they eventually will. Now you're definitely seeing some caution and maybe some lessons learned from that era. These stocks aren't invincible. And usually people don't talk about a bubble when we're in a bubble, right? So the idea that people are still keeping an eye out for these things, and there are phrases or trends that could take these stocks down, tells you a little bit that it's maybe not a full-blown bubble, at least just yet.
Your recent research has looked at some metrics that you track at Bloomberg Intelligence about showing that investors still are relatively calm, right? There's some pieces of data that you're looking at that are showing that there's not that much panic when you look at, I think it's breadth, right?
Yeah, so when we run our market pulse sentiment index, which takes a look at whether or not investors are getting too manic or panicky. So typically when they get too manic, that's a sign that the rallies run too hot. Likely it historically has told us that it's likely to slow down going forward. We aren't seeing that right now. We aren't seeing that in any of the underlying indicators that typically signal overbrilliance. We are seeing low volatility stocks do rather poorly compared to their high volatility counterparts. That's sort of a sign that we're in this risk-on environment. But when you look at breadth, when you look at how well highly levered versus low levered stocks are performing, we aren't seeing this mania that usually leads to a drawback because you've just piled too much into maybe more garbagey stocks without keeping an eye on what's actually happening underneath.
What are we seeing in terms, though, of companies hitting weekly highs, companies hitting, 52-week highs, 52-week lows. What's the Hindenburg omen?
Well, what we know is that the largest stocks, the Mag 7, we did analysis on this recently, are really what ultimately determines the direction of the index. And this has really been more and more true over the past 12 months, that if the Mag 7 are up on any given day, the index will be up. If the Mag 7 are down, the index will be down. I think there was a day last week where the Mag 7, it was the day Meta reported. The Mag 7 were down on median, so the index was down, but every other stock was actually up on median if you looked at the rest. So I think looking at breadth metrics to kind of tell you where the index might be going, we're not really in that regime right now. We're in this very highly concentrated regime where just because of the nature of the index weighting, there's only a handful of stocks that are really going to dictate its overall direction. That said, the bottom isn't falling out from underneath the market or anything like that. You don't just have these Mag 7 stocks doing incredibly well and everything else doing poorly. Like I said, we just had a day recently where Mag 7 did poorly, everything else did well, but the market was still down. So we look at it to kind of see, we look at breadth to see, well, is the bottom falling out from under the market? Is the market doing well just because the Mag 7's doing well? But that's definitely not what we're seeing right now.
All right. Gillian Wolff, global equity strategist at Bloomberg Intelligence. Thank you for joining us. Let's turn now to the New York City mayoral election today, where voters have been flocking to polls in record numbers to choose between Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani, independent candidate Andrew Cuomo, and Republican Curtis Sliwa. Bloomberg News senior reporter Myles Miller joins us. He's outside Brooklyn Bridge Park on this important day for the Big Apple. Myles, just give us a take on just the vibe right now in Brooklyn as more voters head to the polls. Like I said, this has already been record turnout in early voting, but what are you seeing on the ground now?
Yeah, you know, if you look at the early voting tallies, the neighborhood, one of the neighborhoods that voted in the highest numbers was Windsor Terrace, which is not too far from where I'm standing. Definitely a liberal or center-left stronghold in the Democratic voting base in this city. And they will be a crucial part of deciding who wins today's election. Now, I talked to Zohran Mamdani earlier this morning just about what he felt as it relates to what would be a mandate, right? You know, right now, the latest polling has him at about a 10-point difference between the independent in this race, Andrew Cuomo, and 11 points with Curtis Sliwa. And he told me any victory is a mandate. A very confident statement from a 34-year-old assembly member who heads into tonight as the clear front runner in this race. This race has been defined by generational and ideological divides, and of course the late-breaking twist of Donald Trump making that endorsement towards Andrew Cuomo. Will it have a measurable difference, or will it make a difference in this race? That remains to be seen, specifically because it was such a late endorsement, and then Cuomo also said that it wasn't an endorsement because Trump didn't call him, so it wasn't really an endorsement. But Trump is saying that if Mamdani is to take office, what that would mean is that he would not send any funds.
I mean, it's been happening for weeks, Myles. If you look at Donald Trump's Truth Social account or his Twitter feed, it is flooded with endorsements for Cuomo, begging voters not to vote for Sliwa. He's been trying to push Eric Adams out of the race for weeks now, and it's very clear that the entire MAGA machine is behind Andrew Cuomo. And it's also interesting that this is someone who left Albany in disgrace, right? Let's not forget the allegations of sexual impropriety that pushed him out. He had to resign his position as governor. Why would New Yorkers then vote him into arguably a more important job?
Yeah, it's important to note that there was contrition, right? Like, if we think back to 2021, there was a very contrite Governor Andrew Cuomo, you know, apologizing for what he's done. But now in 2025, he seems to have done a complete, 180 on that, and is saying that they found no wrongdoing, that the 5 DAs found no wrongdoing. But he did leave office because he didn't want it to be a distraction. But when you get down to the brass tacks of it, the big sort of divide here is a candidate in Zohran Mamdani who is pitching populist ideas that he thinks thinks can get funded at a certain point that will lead New Yorkers to a more affordable New York. And then Andrew Cuomo, who is doing basically the typical Democratic talking points: more cops for a safer New York, not to close Rikers Island, but to come up with a new plan on that.
And more cops is a Democratic talking point?
With tax increases.
I feel like the Democrats have gone recently the other way. I mean, I remember Bill de Blasio, right? And Eric Adams didn't exactly clean up the streets either from crime. It's just fascinating to me that the big money has gotten behind Cuomo, as well as the MAGA Republican movement, all because of this fear that Mamdani will somehow turn this city into a centrally controlled communist economy. Is it really likely, Myles, and you've covered New York politics for so long, you understand the ins and outs of how things work at City Hall and with City Council, that Mamdani, even if he were, full-blooded Marxist communist, could really push through policies that mean taxing everybody from the middle class up to pay for the poorest people?
The one thing, and I worked for the last, I would say, pretty left-wing mayor in this city, Bill de Blasio. And the one thing you have to know is that if you run for mayor of New York City, you could be far right or far left. You're going to have to come to the middle because this is a consensus city. You're going to have to work with a city council to get these things done. The first shot I saw today that Mamdani took against that liberal city council that has been backing him was to say, for rezoning, that's been a big issue in the city. This park would not have been built without for rezoning. He said, you know what, the mayor, the city council speaker, and the borough president should have a say in rezoning legislation and rezoning applications, not just city council members. That's the reason why there's not a lot of affordable housing in this city. And so he's going to have to strike that balance. But in order to get anything done in New York, you need the city council, you need the support of the state legislature and the governor, and you need the business community. And he's been making some inroads with the business community. You saw that with him saying he'd keep Jessica Tisch, the police commissioner. But back to what you were saying about crime, you say what you want about Eric Adams. Crime numbers have continued to go down in the city and across the country. But, Eric Adams has done quite something on crime with the teams in the subways and all of that. So you have to look at that history too. That crime is going down, and that Mamdani, while he doesn't want to add cops, is saying that what he'll do for crime is to keep this police commissioner, who he thinks has been doing a good job on crime and also rooting out corruption in the police department.
Bloomberg News senior reporter Myles Miller, right there in Brooklyn Bridge Park. Thank you for joining us. That's the New York City mayor race. Let's go to the Garden State. Bloomberg TV's Romaine Bostick joins us. He's in New Jersey right now, talking about state and local elections in New Jersey. So that was New York. Romaine, why does the business community, why does Wall Street care about the elections in New Jersey?
Oh, why do they care? Well, let me tell you, Emily, they don't call this Wall Street West for nothing. I'm in Jersey City, New Jersey, Grove and Mercer Streets to be exact. And just a few blocks away from me, you'll find a slew of some of the biggest financial firms in the world. In fact, a lot of the same financial firms that you see on the other side of the Hudson River, but they have a big presence here. And that's really a testament to what politicians have done over the last 20 or 30 years to attract new businesses and, more importantly, new residents to this state and specifically to this city. And that is a big part of what's on the line in two key elections here. A mayoral race here in Jersey City, New Jersey. And, of course, Emily and Matt, that gubernatorial race between Mikey Sherrill and Jack Ciattarelli, a race that just a few weeks ago looked like Mikey Sherrill was going to run away from it. But as of today, based on the polls, it is a toss-up to the hilt.
I wonder what we could see in terms of different policies enacted there. I was just talking with Myles Miller about how much power the mayor has in New York. What's the case with the governor in New Jersey? What kind of different policies would we see if either one was elected?
Well, the governorship here in New Jersey is a little bit different than most states. The governor here has a tremendous amount of power relative to what you see in other states, primarily just because of the way that position was structured. Remember, I mean, just a decade or two ago, they didn't even have a lieutenant governor. The governor has a lot of ability to make unilateral decisions about a lot of what goes on in this state. And on top of that, if for some reason Mikey Sherrill, the Democratic candidate, does win, remember, she basically has a Democratic legislature. She has the majority seats in the U.S. House of Representatives represented by her party. And, of course, both U.S. Senate seats also Democrats. So she would be able to get a lot done. Chitterelli would have to work a little bit harder with Andy Kim, of course, the Democratic senator, as well as the other Democratic senator in this state in order to get some of those things done. But I don't think that's really an impediment for either one of them for one big reason, that a lot of the policies, or at least a lot of the policies that voters want to see them address, like affordable housing, like electricity prices, as well as budget issues and the cost of schooling. A lot of those issues are things that the governor, herself, can more or less get done on their own without a whole lot of backing or support from either the legislator or some of the local municipalities. Basically, it's kind of do what you want within reason.
Romaine, I'm curious, from the sources you're talking to, what do you think this means for the Democratic Party? And I ask because, I listen to Balance of Power all the time on Bloomberg Radio, and the Republicans say the mayoral race here is basically a referendum on the Democratic Party, as if Mamdani wins, that means the Democrats are all communists. Whereas the Democrats say, why can't you judge us by Mikey Sherrill? Like, why can't you judge us by the centrists in this party? What are you hearing?
Well, I mean, to say it's a referendum might be a little bit overstatement. I think you have to understand one big thing about New Jersey. Yes, this is a Democratic state, more or less. It's controlled by the Democrats, and they've more or less controlled it for the past 30-plus years. However, this has always been a relatively centrist state. Remember, you've had two Republican governors that managed to get reelected, Chris Christie and Christie Todd Whitman back in the 1990s and Chris Christie in the 2000s. So, it's not that they're reticent to embrace Republicans at all. And even the brand of republicanism in this state is much more center-right than the far-right that we're seeing in other parts of this country. Even Jack Chitterelli, who has gravitated a little bit more to the far-right in this particular campaign, remember, he's run for governor twice before, and he pretty much towed the line more to the center of the political spectrum here. And based on the policies he's proposed, if he were to be elected, most likely that is kind of where he would probably settle in, if not by choice, certainly by necessity. This is a state where you have something like 38% of the registered voters are Democrats, only 25% are registered Republicans, but about 35% are independents. And that really does help to make up the complexion of where politics goes in this country. And I don't think, Matt, that's necessarily reflective of what you're seeing in other states where you're seeing a lot more division and a lot more lopsidedness in terms of how people vote and what policies that they back.
Romaine, thank you for joining us. That's Romaine Bostick, Bloomberg TV, joining us on location in Jersey City, New Jersey. We'll check back on New Jersey soon. Right now, let's take a look at markets. Here's Charlie Pellet with the Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you very much. And here's what's going on. We've got stock bulls getting a wake-up call big time from Wall Street CEOs. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all in the red. Dow Industrials right now down 272, a drop there of just about 0.6%. S&P 500 down 69, decline of 1%. The NASDAQ Composite Index down 400. For NASDAQ, that represents a drop of just about 1.7%. So stocks are declining. Dow, S&P, NASDAQ all in the red. The 10-year, 4.08%, with the 2-year, 3.57%. Spot gold down $58 the ounce, down 1.5%, 39.42. West Texas Intermediate crude, 60.58 a barrel on WTI, down 0.8%. The big news, though, Bitcoin, it is down 5.2%, just above $101,000, but Bitcoin did trade briefly below $100,000. Corporate news, Apple preparing to enter the low-cost laptop market for the first time, developing a budget Mac aimed at luring away customers from Chromebooks and entry-level Windows PCs. On a down day for much of the market, we've got Apple shares up by about 0.5%. Hertz Global shares are surging 40% right now. This after it posted better than expected profit in the third quarter. Rival Avis Budget Group, ticker CAR, We've got shares of Avis up by 5.3%, but Hertz bears repeating, up now by 40.2%. Again, recapping a 5% drop in Bitcoin, a 1.7% drop right now for the S&P 500 index. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you, Charlie. Let's talk about energy now with the new CEO of Williams, one of the largest natural gas infrastructure companies in the United States. Williams transports, processes, and stores natural gas from production basins to utilities and end users. They're known as a midstream company. $70 billion in market cap, Matt, and they transport about 30% of the natural gas consumed in the U.S. We're joined now by Chad Zamarin, president and CEO of Williams, on Zoom from Tulsa, Oklahoma. He officially took over as CEO in July. Let's start with earnings. Thanks for joining us. You see cap expenditures increasing. What are you going to be spending on and why?
Yeah, great question. And thanks for having me. First, what I'd say is we announced earnings today, and team has delivered just an incredible run. 13% increase in Q3 earnings for 2025 over 2024. And importantly, we reaffirmed our guidance for this year, which we've raised by a total of $350 million at the earnings midpoint to $7.75 billion. And when we deliver our numbers, that will cap a 5-year compound annual growth rate of 9% for EBITDA and 14% compound annual growth rate over the last 5 years for EPS, which is pretty phenomenal for a company of our size and in our space. And so, it's been a great performance for the team, and looking forward, the next 5 years look even more exciting. And we increased the capital that we will be deploying between now and the end of the year. And we're investing in the critical infrastructure in our country that delivers natural gas to homes, to businesses, increasingly to LNG facilities, so we can send natural gas through LNG to our friends and allies around the world. And we're also developing projects that directly serve hyperscale data centers. We're building gas and power generation infrastructure that helps us with speed to market solutions that will bring our ability to compete and ultimately win the race for AI to our customers across the United States.
Chad, what's this market look like to you, nationally compared to globally? Because you mentioned the surging gas demand. We got to power these AI centers. LNG exports should be huge from the U.S. At the same time, you have ExxonMobil dragging its feet on a huge field in Mozambique because they're worried that the system could get flooded, and you've got warnings of a big glut in the global oil market as well. So how do you juxtapose the two, this market and the entire globe?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we think about is we're a company that's been around for over 100 years, been building critical energy infrastructure for over a century. And we take a very long-term view when it comes to how we steer the strategy of our company. And there are two very important fundamentals that drive the need for natural gas. The first, there are still billions of people living around the world in energy poverty. And so natural gas is the most scalable solution that we have to balance affordability, reliability, and low carbon emissions energy that we can send from the U.S. to our friends and allies around the world. So that's going to be an important theme that will play out, frankly, for decades and generations. The world's increasing need for energy to lift people out of poverty and ensure energy affordability and prosperity around the world. That's why LNG exports are so important from the United States. We are the low-cost producer of natural gas. Think about this. We can produce natural gas here in the U.S. that on an energy equivalent basis is the equivalent of 50 cents per gallon gasoline. That's our American affordability superpower, natural gas. And so exporting that to our friends and allies around the world is good for us. It's good for our friends and allies around the world. And then, as you mentioned, you look back here at home, for 25 years, we haven't grown electricity production in the United States. For 25 years, we haven't grown electricity production. And now we want to win the race for the next generation of technology. And it's going to take us building electricity and energy at a scale that we haven't done for decades. And so we as a country need to get back to building, and natural gas will be the most important solution for both speed to market, but also scalability, importantly, affordability. That is our competitive advantage here in the United States, the ability to do big things, but we've got to have affordable, reliable energy in order to scale.
How does Williams view its role relative to renewables, other sources of clean energy? You talk about this insatiable demand here. Where does liquefied natural gas kind of fit in the energy transition?
Yeah, importantly, you've got to do a mixture of many different things. And any market that has been able to successfully integrate renewables, which have intermittency, the sun is not always shining, the wind is not always blowing. The only markets that have done that successfully and preserved reliability and affordability have done that in combination with natural gas for power generation. And that's what we see here in the United States. You know, I'm patching in here from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Oklahoma has a great wind resource. The reason why it works and we have affordable, reliable, abundant energy in Oklahoma is because when the wind slows down, natural gas generation picks up the slack. It is our most dispatchable energy solution, and it's our most affordable. It can allow us to invest in more expensive technologies, but keep affordability within our country. And, you know, you talk about, you know, the region that you're in, you, up in the Northeast in New England, we pay on average in New England and in New York about 3 times the national average for natural gas. And during the winter months, 30 times where what we pay in other parts of the country. That's not because we don't have enough natural gas. It's because we don't have infrastructure to bring it into those markets and serve those markets. So we need to continue to do a combination of technologies and solutions. But I can tell you that the most scalable, most important enabler, whether you want to grow renewables or you want to drive down energy costs, which ultimately translates to total affordability for consumers, natural gas is our superpower, and we think you've got to lean into it.
Chad, I got to ask you about the great state of Ohio. I know you're investing a lot there, and even though, you know, my Ohio State Buckeyes are going to visit and, like, let's face it, beat your Purdue Boilermakers this weekend. You still have to be excited about that power project. Tell us about it.
Yeah, very excited. And I think Ohio is a great example of a state that's been very friendly for business and very friendly for infrastructure development, and they're winning as a result. And so, you know, you look at our first project that we've announced for power innovation. It's a project that will power one of our country's most important artificial intelligence data centers. And we're going to bring that power to market in under 14 months. You know, if we were to rely on expanding the grid, that might take 6 to 8 years. We're not going to win the race for artificial intelligence if it's going to take 6 to 8 years to expand our grid. We need to do that. It's going to take time. So we're going to keep building our pipeline systems in order to deliver more grid capacity over time. But we also have to be able to meet these hyperscalers and our customers where they have their needs. We've got to do it with speed. And in Ohio, we've announced a very exciting project that will be one of the largest advanced AI data centers on the planet when it comes online mid-2026.
Chad, great to have you with us. Thanks very much. And I do wish you the best of luck this weekend. I wish they'd done better against Michigan.
I'm just following UVA football, Matt.
We're
having a really great year.
Yeah,
I know
you are doing well.
Ohio, it's typical for you guys, but, you know, for the Virginians, this is an exciting time.
Let's, well, congratulations on that, and I'll be following along as well. We are absolutely packed with UVA Mafia here at Bloomberg LP. I want to get down to another Southerner, David Gura, down south of the equator right there in Brazil. Are you in Rio? Sorry, you're at the COP30 in Rio. What are you taking from that conference? Because a lot of big heavy hitters not attending.
Yeah, so this is the kind of prelude to the bigger COP30 Leaders Summit, Matt. And so we've had a lot of conversations among governors and mayors from, yes, the United States, but around the world, some private sector investors here as well. I have Danny Ioschpe with me. Currently, he is the high-level champion for climate for COP30. Joins me here. He's a businessman on the board of many companies, including Embraer. Dan, great to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
Let me ask you, first of all, just sort of what success looks like from a business perspective when you think about this COP30. What are you hoping for?
Implementation.
Implementation.
Implementation, that's number one. And a good framework for us to continue to implement. I think we realized that there was a missing link between COPs and that we could continue with the effort throughout the cycles, regardless of where COP is being held. So our architecture for the climate action agenda thought a lot about it. The other point was to work on existing initiatives, not necessarily generate many new initiatives on COP, but make sure that the more than 700 initiatives that we have out there on climate action were being dealt and debottlenecked over time. That's how we plan this way of working the climate action agenda.
Part of your job, you've been in the job since April, is to get other business people to come to this event. Give us a sense of how successful you've been. We've heard a lot of national leaders aren't coming. Will you have a significant presence of business leaders here?
I think we are okay on that matter. But honestly, more than having the people in Belém, which is also very important, we want to have attention of everyone to the process. How can everybody contribute, either remote or present, to the plan of accelerated solutions, the granary of solutions, and again, to extract the roadblocks so that very objective things like, for instance, sustainable aviation fuel or maritime fuel, how can we make those things happen quicker? Hard to abate sectors, steel, cement, tripling or quadrupling renewables. How can this be done in the second half of the decade in a very constructive, efficient, and continuous way?
You're going right where I want to go, which is, you know, transportation and mobility so well. When you look at the overarching goals for COP30, in those two sectors in particular, what's the most effective thing companies in those sectors can do to achieve those COP30 goals?
I think at the end of the day, the issue of expanding dramatically the renewables is a very basic subject for all the rest. The more we have on that, the best will be. Solar is a very good example. This amazing curve of adoption, bringing the costs to a very competitive position and being like the quickest energy that you can build, that's great because you can really make other things happen when you go to the hard to abate sectors. So I think that's probably a number one or a very critical one. But then we need also regulation. Again, when you think about maritime, we were going in a certain speed in a certain direction. Now there is somehow a holdback. So how can we get back on track and have regulation, because business needs, innovation needs a regulation framework to work better.
We are in the middle of this global energy transition. Where does Brazil in that? What's the role that it plays?
Solution.
How far along are we? Solutions.
Solution. Brazil is a solution, is a powerhouse for renewables. So when you think about a lot of things that will need to be done, you will do these things better where you have renewables. That's not only Brazil. If you think about the US, at least part of US, like Texas as an example, is a powerhouse as well for renewables. So these areas of the world will probably expand value chains in them. Of course, if you have minerals, if you have food, agriculture, even better, because you can use this renewable to work on basic products that otherwise could be eventually exported to be transformed in a place where you don't have that. So probably these regions will add value based on a power shoring strategy, as we say.
I wanted to ask you about maybe challenges to investment. So before I came down here, I saw the news of the crackdown that took place in Rio. A lot of people killed in an effort to eradicate criminals from the city. How does that play into the general investor appetite for coming to Brazil, safety and them seeing something like that?
Play very much. It's a very negative event, of course, and it adds a lot of insecurity and cost because you have to think of ways to move goods and to move people with a lot of plans B and additional security. For instance, premium on insurance, which gets much higher. So in real life, this is very negative. But I would say that maybe even worse than that, the cost of capital in places like Brazil are still very high. The tax system is not the most efficient. We are moving in the right direction, and there is a big reform here, but it will be done around 2032, sorry. So there is still some time to get there. And we have this package that we call Cost Brazil. And the two biggest items are cost of capital and tax. And then you go to this whole cost of insecurity, besides human lives, which is bad enough, right. You have real life or real economy costs associated to that.
Let me ask you lastly just about this economic environment. So the benchmark rate here, about 15%, no real prospect of that coming down anytime soon. This is a country that President Trump has targeted with a very high tariff rate, 50%, although there have been conversations between your president and the President of the United States about that in recent days. From your vantage, as a businessman, how do you see the economic and business climate here? And do you see prospects for things improving in light of the fact that rates are still high? and there is this punitive tariff in place?
For all that you describe, I honestly just see ways of improving.
You do?
Because some of these things are a bit exaggerated to the worst, and we know how to get them better. So I think that's the route. Probably next year we will have lower interest rates. Probably sooner than later, U.S.-Brazil relationship will be back in a very good tone, as it has been for 200 years. And I think the Brazilian society, the Brazilian business environment is very eager to get to this position in those two topics at least.
And how has Brazil's kind of perspective on the world changed in this moment again? So with this trade war happening, what are the other economies or countries that Brazil is looking to more seriously now?
I think Brazil can play a global role in many aspects. Again, we have a good source of minerals, of water, of renewable energy, of grains for food. So there is an amazing base here, and we need to expand those value chains to improve the wealth of the people, to promote socioeconomic development. And this can only be done on a sustainable manner. The route of not being sustainable doesn't make much sense, especially for a place where you have all these opportunities. So a strategy for the country centered into sustainability seems to make a lot of sense, and we hope that this is the route that Brazil will take over time.
Dan, great to speak with you. Thank you very much. That's Dan Ioschpe, the high-level champion for climate for COP30, joining me here in Rio de Janeiro. Matt and Emily, I'll send it back to you in New York.
Bloomberg's David Gura, thank you so much for that interview. Markets lower right now. We have about an hour left to go in the trading day. Let's take a look at markets and other business news with Charlie Pellet.
I thank you very much, Emily. It is a tough day for the bulls today, with the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all declining. S&P right now down 78, dropped there to 67.72, a decline of 1.2% on the S&P. The Dow Industrials down 309 now, down 0.6%. NASDAQ Composite Index is slumping 1.9%. A chorus of Wall Street executives warning investors to brace for a pullback amid lofty valuations. 10-year is currently yielding 4.08%, with the 2-year 3.57%. Spot gold down 1.5%, now at $39.41 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude oil down 0.8%. WTI $60.58 a barrel. Bitcoin, major story today, trading at 100,907. Bitcoin now down 5.6%. Briefly, we did see Bitcoin trade below $100,000. Just a month into becoming CEO at Yum Brands, Chris Turner has decided it might be time to ditch Pizza Hut. Yum has initiated a strategic review of the chain, which generates less than 15% of its total revenue. Yum shares on a down day for the rest of the market. Yum Brands up by 6.7%. Lots going on in the pizza world today. Papa John's International shares are plunging following a report that Apollo Global Management pulled its bid to take the pizza chain private. PZZA on the ticker. Right now, we got Papa John's down by 17.9%. Recapping, S&P lower by 81, down 1.2% for on-demand news 24 hours a day. Subscribe to Bloomberg News now, wherever you get your podcast. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thanks very much. Now, on the latest installment of our weekly discussion focused on women, money, and power, we explore all the economic implications of today's New York City mayoral election with one of the most influential women in the history of Big Apple politics.
And that's Kathy Wylde. She joins to discuss her view on the New York City mayoral election and how the city's next mayor will impact the local and regional economy and its related businesses. She's also set to step down at the end of the year from her role as president and CEO of the Partnership for New York City, a business lobbying group with 350 CEOs in its ranks.
And I should say that our owner and founder, Michael R. Bloomberg, and former New York City mayor, of course, gave $1.5 million to a super PAC supporting Andrew M. Cuomo's bid for mayor and reiterated his support for the former New York governor a week before this election. So we do want to make that disclaimer. Now, having said all of that, Kathy, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
What's your overview of this race? Because it has been incredibly energetic and incredibly well followed.
Well, I think number one, it's exciting that we have record turnouts at the polls for a local election, and we have literally hundreds of thousands of newly registered voters coming to the polls, a lot of them young people. And as our country has become increasingly cynical about politicians and their motives, it's great to see the level of excitement that this election has generated, and particularly the candidacy of a very young New Yorker, 34-year-old Zohran Mamdani, who is the Democratic nominee for mayor of the city.
The headline on the top of the Bloomberg terminal today: New York City to decide if a socialist will run the capital of capitalism. In your view, what does Wall Street, what does the business community, the capitalist community of New York City want out of this election?
Well, I think what we want is political stability. And I don't think that the voters going to the polls are voting for Mamdani because he's a socialist or because they think he's going to transform our capitalist system. That is not within the power of any mayor. And so we're not looking for a major economic change in the city. I think what Mamdani's message has been about, which the business community agrees with, is that New York is the highest cost city in America. Government spending at the state and city level has gone up more than 50% over the past decade, and we can't afford to keep that going. So everybody is looking for a more affordable city. Now, we've got opposite ideas in many cases about how to get there. The business community's position is raising taxes makes New York more expensive. Mamdani's position started out being, I'm going to raise taxes to pay for cheaper housing and health and child care and cheaper groceries. I think that we've made some progress in the last 6 months in getting him to take a slightly more nuanced position, where he has said, I have my goals of a more affordable city, but I welcome the business community's advice on how to get there. So I don't think that this is a crisis situation, regardless of the outcome of the mayoral election. And I do think it's great that more people are engaging in local politics.
I do hear the concern that he'll raise taxes voiced from the traders and fund managers and analysts with whom I speak every day on the Bloomberg terminal. They're not the super rich, billionaire class. They're mostly just scraping by. It is a very expensive city, to raise children in. Do you think even if he wanted to raise taxes substantially, he has the power to do so as mayor?
Under our Constitution, the mayor has no power to raise income or corporate taxes. That belongs to the governor and the state legislature. So, no, I do not think that there is a reason to be that concerned, because that's going to be a conversation. The governor has said she does not support tax increases at this time. And so what we're looking at is a situation where even if the mayor and the city council were to try to raise expenditures beyond what is prudent, that at that point, we have a fiscal control board that comes into play that was set up after the financial crisis, the fiscal crisis the city faced in the 1970s. We have a financial control board that the governor, the state controller run, that gets put in place automatically if the city's budget goes out of whack. So we have many protections to make sure that New York remains fiscally sound. There is a debt limit. A mayor cannot borrow more than a prudent amount without hitting that debt ceiling. So there are lots of checks and balances in city government. The mayor does have a great deal of power over real estate decisions, land use, zoning decisions, and was very glad to see that this morning Mamdani joined with Andrew Cuomo, another candidate, the former governor. He joined with him in supporting 3 propositions on the ballot that would change the city charter to help us develop more affordable housing more quickly and more cheaply. So I think that his housing agenda is very consistent with what the private sector wants to see. So in that area where he has real power, real estate and land use, I think we're in sync.
And yet you still see these headlines about, New York's wealthy wanting to leave, home prices in Connecticut going up because they want to leave New York. Do you think those fears are overblown then?
I think that there is a danger of people leaving New York because they can't afford the quality of life they want in the city. Very expensive to buy a home. To buy a home in Manhattan is now over $1 million. In Brooklyn and Queens, it's over $700,000. Most of the population, like 95%, cannot afford that. So we have an affordability crisis. Child care is costing $26,000 to $40,000 per year per child. What you have to earn, a household has to earn several $100,000 to be able to afford the high rents, over $3,500 a month now in terms of asking rents. You have to earn a lot of money right now to live in New York. That's what this campaign has been about, and people are really voting for a more affordable city. Now, you don't get a more affordable city by raising taxes. So I think that's something that our next mayor is going to find out pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
We are talking, just as a reminder, to Kathy Wylde from the Partnership for New York City, for decades one of the city's most influential civic voices. And Kathy, I'm getting a message right now from a listener who's voicing kind of the same kind of surprise that I was talking about with you during the commercial break. It is wild that New York, or that the Democratic Party, couldn't come up with anyone to challenge Zohran Mamdani other than a governor who was chased out of Albany by his own party and a mayor who's basically been chased out of office by his own party. Why couldn't the Democrats come up with anyone qualified to challenge this 34-year-old newcomer?
Well, when he started out last September in his campaign, Zohran Mamdani had less than 1% of the vote and was considered a totally unlikely candidate to rise to the occasion. He only became a viable candidate when Governor Cuomo got into the race, and basically the 7 other Democrats in the race, starting with the current mayor, Eric Adams, were not seen by the voting public in the primary. The other candidates were not, and the mayor dropped out of the primary. He had probably the best chance of re-election in many cases, but he dropped out. And that left us with a good range of Democratic candidates: the city controller, the speaker of the city council, a state senator, the former controller. We had a good field of candidates. But the clear alternative during the course of the election, the clear alternative to Mayor Adams and former Governor Cuomo became Zohran Mamdani, and he kind of emerged out of the anti-vote for the other candidates.
You've arranged conversations between Mamdani and the business community. We talked a lot at the beginning of this interview about the affordability crisis resonating with a lot of New Yorkers. You don't have to name names, but I'm wondering if in those conversations, anyone was successfully convinced that maybe they were a skeptic of Mamdani and they came out of the conversations changing their mind.
I think they came out of the conversations and the meetings that we had, and we had a number of them, and to his credit, right after the primary, Zohran called me up and said, I would like to, give me the names and numbers of the business leaders that I should speak to who are concerned about my candidacy, so I can reassure them my agenda is not to socialize business. My agenda is to make this a more affordable city of opportunity. Which honestly is a goal that we all share. So my experience in seeing this is that people recognize he's a very smart, very young man. The worry is, would you hire this person to run a 300,000 person corporation? The answer to that is probably no. But if you're looking for a mayor who is willing to bring in strong professionals, and I think everybody felt better when he said he would retain our current police commissioner, who has a terrific track record and is very well regarded. Jessica Tisch is our current commissioner. He said that 3 weeks ago he would ask her to stay. That made a big impact because the question is, will he bring in strong professionals to run the city agencies? What people care about is that we have a safe city, that the agencies are all run well, that the sanitation department picks up the garbage, that the education system produces smart kids. All those, that's what city government does. And that all depends on who are the commissioners, who are the mayor's deputies. And honestly, I think Mamdani could be a very good marketer of the city. He's a compelling communicator. And honestly, that's a lot of what Mike Bloomberg did for our city. He marketed New York and brought us really out of the crisis of 9/11 and made New York a technology capital of the world. He made enormous contribution on restoring people's confidence, the people here and the people around the world, restoring their confidence in New York. And Mamdani has some of those salesman qualities that I think might be very effective.
Kathy, can I ask about your confidence in New York as you prepare to pass the baton in terms of the leadership of partnership for New York City? What's your view on public-private collaboration as you've spent years in this job, and what's your hope for this city?
Well, ironically, as government has less money, which is what we anticipate with cutbacks in federal funds and the demands for the needs that in the city for more government spending. As government has less money, there's much more motivation to bring in the private sector and build public-private partnerships. That's what happened after the fiscal crisis in the 70s. That's when our organization and many others in the city were created, where the private sector really took over leading investment in a lot of areas. And I think that we may go through the same cycle as we look forward in terms of the fiscal situation of the city and state being tough as the federal government cuts back. And I think that will be, that is the basis for building new public-private partnerships. When government has all the money in the world, they certainly want to spend it. But when they're broke, they're going to look to the private sector. And the smart thing to do is look for investment and ways to cut costs and to make it more efficient to operate here. And that's an alternative to raising taxes. And I'm hoping we're going to be able to make that case to the next mayor.
Kathy Wylde, thank you so much. That's Kathy Wylde, President and CEO of the Partnership for New York City. We thank you for your time. Let's take a look at some stocks on the move. I'm Emily Graffeo, joined now by Norah Mulinda, Bloomberg Television markets correspondent. Norah, let's start with Palantir. This is quite a big move.
This is a stock that is seeing some of the highest trading volume in the stock market right now in the S&P 500, followed behind NVIDIA. Of course, we know that we've been really looking at Palantir shares, ticker PLTR, because they've really been declining. A lot of people worrying about fears about potential stretch valuations here for this company. I mean, if you look at the price to sales ratio on a trailing basis, we see that sitting at about 85 for Palantir. This is the highest that we're seeing for any stock in the S&P 500. So while they did report stellar results, and of course, if you think about their earnings more broadly, 21 consecutive quarters where they had not only not missed expectations, but they actually reported a beat on their earnings. But we are seeing people starting to scrutinize and wondering if there's broader fears of a potential AI bubble.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a stock that's run up 150% this year. To see a drop like this today, down over 8%, it almost sparks fears, perhaps, that is this a microcosm for what's going to come next when we talk about valuation stocks running up so much and then having a drop like this? Okay, Novo Nordisk is next.
Yes, this one is in focus. This is ticker NVR. We're looking at the ADRs here. And of course, this has been the big story in the drug pharma space. A little bit of a duking it out to see who can get this company, Metsera. This is ticker MTSR. So you're really seeing a bidding war between Novo Nordisk and Pfizer. Both of them are really vying for this company, Metsera, because it offers obesity pills and different things to manage that. And it really is a startup here. So people are really just trying to think about how they can make the next step forward here in the pharmaceutical space and thinking about next generation treatments. So you are seeing a lot of companies just really trying to see who can get this to get Metsera. And you're seeing shares of Metsera up about 21% right now as we speak. But shares of Novo Nordisk pulling back down about 2% right now.
Right. And that's Novo ticker NVO. All right, and let's finally go to a company that, if you live in New York City, you know pretty well, and I think people in other cities know pretty well.
And we also know it to be quite expensive here to take in the city as opposed to the subway. But we're looking at ticker Uber, UBER, makes it super easy for you there. We're seeing shares seeing some weakness right now. Shares of Uber down about 6% right now as we speak. And this is after the company saw some legal charges that ate into its third quarter profits here. But it did report rideshare and delivery trips that soared. But I mean, you are seeing a lot of people heavily scrutinizing the fact of its third quarter profits, really starting to see some weakness here when you're thinking about those legal charges here, Emily.
Norah Mulinda, Bloomberg Television Markets correspondent. Fellow Wahoo, thank you so much. For more conversations like this, listen to our new Stock Movers podcast. Subscribe for 5-minute episodes on the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Listen to Stock Movers on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. If you're watching us on YouTube or listening to us on radio, Bloomberg Businessweek Daily continues. If you're with us on Bloomberg Television, the close is up next. Markets down, S&P down over 1%. People finding safety in bonds.